Oh, hello there. Yes, it's the weekend, and I thought we'd just have a look through this particular latest offering from the Daily Telegraph about the National Conservatism Conference that was held last week. The title is intriguing, as what made me read it. Meet the Conservatives, the left, the fear the most. Yes, I'm wondering who it is that I'm going to have to fear in this video. Anyway, let's get a flavour of it.
British conservatism is in crisis.
Fascism.
With record levels of immigration,
something of infinite value, his British passport.
Home Secretary.
Defining.
rampant wokeism,
And give a very warm welcome to Mr. Douglas Murray. Conservatives are always at a certain disadvantage. And one of those disadvantages comes from the fact that everyone is conserving something different.
and amid dire opinion polls for the Tories, this week the best and brightest of the British right gathered in London for the National Conservatism Conference.
The attempts to create overriding states all fail throughout history. The English king is under the law, whereas the French king is the law.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and I'm a journalist from The Telegraph. NatCon has been denounced by the left-wing press as promoting far-right ideas. I went to NatCon to speak to its attendees to find out the truth and whether national conservatism represents the future of the British right.
Yes, indeed. I wonder if it does. No, it doesn't. I think you get a certain flavour there of where we're coming from. I do like the fact that the first word is fascism. Under attack from all sides. Poor old Douglas Murray. The Conservatives are always at a disadvantage. And here they are, having a lovely dinner at the National History Museum. Yes, the sort of money that any left-wing group can only dream of, having a dinner at the National History Museum, hiring the entire thing out. Incredible. Anyway, let's move on. Yes, well, first up we get an interview with a couple of young people, and if you actually read wider about the conference, you'll discover, surprisingly, that there were a lot of young people attending. It's just that an awful lot of them weren't actually British citizens. There are two here that they've managed to find. It would appear that the major objective, and you can see a lot of the faces in the audience that you'll recognise from various right-wing podcasts, that the major objective of the entire enterprise was to introduce workers from American right-wing think tanks to their British counterparts. I'm sure we'll be seeing these two again. I'm not going to play the clip, you can play this for yourself, but I'm sure a lot of these people that we see here are going to actually crop up on various right-wing think tanks being invited to GB News as political commentators style futures. Well, yes, indeed. Next we have Professor James Orr, who's the chair of the UK version of the Edmund Burke Foundation, the people stumping up the money for this. And again, I'm not going to play you the clip because basically what he says is, yes, we just have to look at Ron DeSantis in Florida and see the way forwards. Now, Ron DeSantis, I've said just this weekend, is a man who is over 35 points behind Donald Trump, whose only policy platform appears to be, I don't like queer blokes. Yeah, and everything he's done within his state has done very, very little for ordinary people economically. So if you want to go down that path, by all means, but I'm not absolutely convinced it's a vote winner, especially not if you're a mega corporation like Disney. They know the side of history that they're on. Yes, and next up we have Flavour of the Moment Miriam Cates, who's going to tell us all about it. Let's listen to her.
Do you think the Conservative Party has lost its way?
I think we haven't fully lent into the realignment of 2019. So the promises that we made to the electorate in 2019 about restoring a strong nation, national identity, independence, those kind of things, I think we've partially done that, but I don't think we've fully lent into it. I don't think we've fully fulfilled it.
So if I'm a...
Right, yes. For partially, I think we can read not in the slightest. It's the reason why there are such dire predictions about a wipeout of the Tory party if we get an election next year, are simply those voters who were prepared to kind of lend, and it was a lending, their vote, the whole red wall business with the voters, to the Tories in 2019, appear to effectively have decided they're going to sit on their hands at best this time. So all of those red wall MPs, like oh no, Jonathan Gullis, are very, very likely to lose their seats. It's no wonder that they are so desperate at the moment to hold on to power. Anyway, let's continue with her.
A Conservative voter, and I've seen net migration hit record levels. So it might even hit 1 million people from 2022. Diversity, inclusion, billions of pounds being spent on that, taxpayer money, all these things. Why should I trust the Conservatives at the next election to deliver a Conservative manifesto?
Well, that's a good question, and that's why gatherings like these are trying to push the ideas that we should be more conservative about these things, that we should be bolder in how we treat these issues, so that the electorate knows where we stand. And I think that's a completely fair point. But I think one of the issues that I tried to point out in my speech is that often, particularly Conservative politicians, are very nervous about speaking about anything other than the economy, and that holds us back when we try to grapple with these issues. And people have said, "Oh, you're brave for speaking out about these things," but they're just common sense. And really, 20 years ago, I don't think they would have been anything to write home about. Certainly not speech material. And I think that shows how far we've shut down the debate about issues like family and children and immigration. And
Right, okay, yes, and there in a nutshell is somebody who's not in touch with anything. Yes, we've talked too much about the economy. No, you can't talk about the economy, can you? So you have to talk about how dangerous trans people are, especially if they're 5 and using a toilet, which is exactly the territory she's in. And as ever, astoundingly, you get this woman who's a committed Christian talking about common sense. You can't make it up, can you? Anyway, let's just finish off with her.
Really, I think politicians need to be emboldened to speak about those things again.
Yes, next up we have Jacob Rees-Mogg, and yes, there you are, the future of the Conservative Party apparently. Let's swiftly move on. Yes, and then we have some more Vox Pops, where various people, ironically at a conference where Suella Braverman was one of the major speakers, are earnestly all telling us that they can't possibly mention immigration, even though they keep mentioning immigration. And yes, Tory Boy reporter flirts with a woman and thinks he's in with a chance. I don't think you are, mate.
And then what do we do about the additional bollards thrown in the way of our society by the radical left? Bollards like the gender nonsense and the racialisation of absolutely everything.
NatCon was far from a weak imitation of Tory party conference. Here, people were not afraid to discuss controversial issues, including demography, the empire, immigration, and the degradation of British culture. However, I sensed national conservatism is still too broad of a concept to be a cause to rally behind. NatCon's speakers were politically diverse. On the left, there was Michael Gove, and on the right, Douglas Murray. There was a clear attempt to define the movement through the lens of both wings of the Tory party. If there is to be a conservative restoration in Britain, the nation is a good place to start. However, any attempt to continue the Tory party's failed liberal modernisation project must be put down.
Yes, and there you have it. You can see exactly what the viewpoint is there. Yes, must put down these failed liberal policies. Yeah, And how are you going to put something down that doesn't have... that's not a very apt metaphor. Anyway, I do like the fact that Darren Grimes grabbed himself a ticket. I mean, if ever there was a metaphor for the paucity of thought on the right, for God's sake, it's Darren Grimes, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, if there is to be a Conservative revival, presumably it'll just be bringing in laws against transgender people, because I'm sure that'll work. I mean, honestly, realistically, can you see the women in this audience wanting to, for example, have their reproductive rights attacked? Can't see it happening. This is, after all, a government that brought in the bedroom tax and limited the number of children you can have on benefits. And yet here we are decrying the fact that they can't do anything about the family. I don't know. I mean, please do let me know your own thoughts about this. But it's not just that this is intellectually bankrupt, this stuff. It's just that it's morally bankrupt, because it's attempting to simply give you the same Christmas present you had last year over and over and over again.